Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, of course, we've got COVID cases along with RSV and flu on the rise in this winter season. Hospitals are starting to feel that little pressure again as more people are being admitted to the ER. We're going to see a video of a judge who gets attacked during a sentencing for a multiple offense felon. And we're going to take a look at the deadly earthquake that hit Japan. Japan's kind of one of those center points for earthquakes. This time it was a pretty bad one.
7.6.
Yeah, affected many structures and many people are still missing. But first, with the holiday gatherings and travels, the CDC is seeing more than half the country experiencing a rise in COVID and RSV cases. Experts say that the rise in cases is due in part to less people getting vaccinated. Hospitals are seeing more admissions for RSV and COVID up since February of last year. Dr. Nilesh Patel, chairman of emergency medicine at St. Joseph Medical Center, had this to say about the latest rise in those cases.
He said it's concerning in the sense that volume of the patients is higher. Well, that same hospital is packed with patients with COVID, more than tripling since last month, up 225%. Now, Dr. Patel said that patients are sicker because of existing comorbid diseases, things like cancer or respiratory disease. Now, emergency room visits and deaths are up 12 and 10% respectively, and influenza A and B and other respiratory viruses are also on the rise.
Well, less than 50% of adults and children have been vaccinated for the flu, and the numbers are even less for that of COVID, with 20%. The rise has become so concerning that at least 10 states, including Washington, D.C., have reinstated mask mandates in hospitals. Dr. Nirav Shah, Principal Deputy Director of the CDC, had this to say.
Mr. Shah said, right now, what we're worried about is that if the respiratory virus gets any worse, that the hospitals will be able to scale up and respond appropriately. And it's kind of been a long time since we were having to deal with this amount of COVID and questioning whether the hospitals could handle it.
That's right. Well, emergency room visits are on the rise with what the CDC is saying is a triple threat as more cases of COVID, the flu, and RSV cases are popping up all over the nation. Over 10,000 people have died from COVID-related illnesses since November, while RSV cases are finally starting to plateau. Hospitals, even before COVID became an issue, could become overwhelmed during just a bad flu season. But now with these other viruses presenting themselves, hospitals could really take a big hit this winter season.
Well, Russia has started firing missiles purchased from North Korea into Ukraine, and Iran has agreed to start buying weapons from Russia. Well, how is the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine proceeding along, and what's the thoughts of the citizens and leaders on the matter? Well, take a look at this next video to see for yourself.
The White House said today that Russia has started firing ballistic missiles provided by North Korea into Ukraine. And the U.S. is concerned that Iran will soon agree to sell Russia missiles. We take a look now at the war in Ukraine as it enters its third calendar year. For Ukrainians, it's a grim new year as the war grinds into 2024. The year had barely started when air raid alarms sounded across the country, and explosions lit up the pre-dawn skyline. Russia has stepped up its onslaught of aerial attacks throughout the region, scorching residential blocks in downtown Kyiv, the port city of Odessa, and Kharkiv, among several other cities targeted in recent weeks.
What a present Russia made for us this new year. They are black souls, simply black souls. They bomb residential areas. There are people here. How can one do such a thing?
On Tuesday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky characterized the uptick as conscious terror.
In just a few days, these last days from December 29th till today, Russia has already used almost 300 missiles and more than 200 drones against Ukraine.
At the same time, the conflict has spilled increasingly into Russian-occupied territory. Last month, Ukrainian cruise missiles blew up a docked warship in Crimea, hampering Russia's fleet power in the Black Sea. And a recent explosion in Belgorod killed 24 people. Russian authorities blamed Ukrainian shelling. On New Year's Day, Russian President Vladimir Putin said the attack warrants yet another tit-for-tat response.
Of course, it's a terrorist attack. There's no other way to call it. Should we respond the same way? Of course, we can. We can hit squares in Kyiv or in any other city.
For over a year, there have been no significant territorial gains by Ukraine or Russia. This map shows Russian-controlled regions in Ukraine 1 year ago. Today, it is virtually unchanged, despite Ukraine's counteroffensive efforts on the front lines, and despite high expectations from its Western allies. The U.S. and European nations have armed Ukraine with package after package of tanks, air defense systems, and enough resources to train and equip 17 armored brigades.
Welcome back.
The U.S. alone has contributed $75 billion in aid, most of it toward military assistance, since the war started nearly 2 years ago. But the future of that funding is in grave doubt. Congressional Republicans already balked on an aid deal with the Biden administration last month, stuck weighing the money for Ukraine against other concerns, namely Republican demands for a crackdown on migrants at the southern border. Just like the war, negotiations remain frozen as the West grapples with what to do next.
Well, definitely, as we've mentioned before, with these tensions rising, we're not seeing any peace being brought forth in this situation. And this ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine is just displacing and, angering many of the citizens because they're the ones that have to bear the brunt of this war taking place.
Entering the third year now of that conflict.
That's right. Well, we're going to turn it over to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, for that courtroom situation where a judge was attacked. And also, he's going to talk a little bit about the rising tensions with the ongoing conflict in the Gaza Strip. Larry, what do you have for us?
Mental health is a serious global problem. It is multifactorial and particularly acute in the liberal West, so there's very little popular discourse concerning it. Please see this video as an example.
Well, last night, remember, we showed you this shocking video of a 3-time felon attacking a Las Vegas judge. Well, he was hit with new criminal charges today. We have the new details from CBS's Carter Evans.
Shocking courtroom video from Las Vegas shows the moment 30-year-old Deobra Redden leaps over the bench, tackling Judge Mary Kay Holthus. Redden is a 3-time felon, in court this time for sentencing after pleading guilty to attempted battery with substantial bodily harm. Redden was not in custody at the time, and moments before the attack, he calmly asked the judge for probation.
I feel like I shouldn't be sent to prison, but if it's appropriate for you, then you have to do what you have to do.
But the judge said probation wasn't working.
I think it's time that you get a taste of something else, because I just can't with that history. In accordance with the laws of state Nevada,
Redden tackled the judge to the ground before being wrestled off her. Judge Holthus was injured but not hospitalized. A courtroom marshal was treated at a hospital for his injuries. Redden is in jail now, facing multiple new charges, including battery on a protected person. He's due back in court next week. Carter Evans, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Not only within nations, but among nations, the hostility and violence is the same. The latest major conflict between the international established order and the axis of Middle East nations that have aligned to resist it is catching major headlines as it develops into a broader conflict. The planned approach of the axis, spearheaded by Persia, is apparently designed to hit the order in its pockets along with rockets, utilizing its Houthi brigade in Yemen to hinder and shut down Western commerce in the Red Sea by attacking and hijacking vessels. The American response has been swift, deploying its Navy to the region with lethal consequences in several instances already. But Iran is upholding its end of the bargain so far, deploying a warship to the area to support the Houthis. The hostilities stem from and surround the current war raging between Israel and Palestine, catalyzed by Hamas, which is one of the Palestinian arms of the Axis of Resistance. Israel is reported to be headed to Egypt to discuss the proposition of receiving any number or all of the 100 Israeli hostages which still remain seized by Hamas, who has expressed a complete disinterest in any deal unless there is a complete withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Katan, looks like it's still going to be a stalemate. Of course, they want to get those 100 hostages returned, but of course Hamas is saying that they will not give back any hostages until Israel pulls all of its troops out of the Gaza.
Right.
Well, during the memorial for top Iranian leader Qasem Solemeni, 2 explosions caused the deaths of 100 people in southern Iran. Now, the U.S. State Department was quick to deny having any part in the attack and also said that they have no reason to believe that Israel had any involvement either. Now, the deadly bombing looks similar to how ISIS would carry out such an attack, senior White House officials reported.
ISIS is an enemy to Iran as well as other Arab separatists who have carried out similar attacks over the past few years. Iranian officials reported the bombs were carried in bags but appear to have been detonated by remote control. Solemeni was a commander of Iran's elite Revolutionary Guard Corps and feared by many. In 2020, a U.S. drone strike assassinated him.
Well, the gathering was on the anniversary of Soleimani's death, which was being attended by thousands of people. Now, after the first bomb detonated, chaos ensued. Then the second bomb exploded 15 minutes later, targeting those who were fleeing the first bomb.
While it is still unknown who carried out these attacks, it is another sign of violence surging in the region. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has vowed a, quote, harsh response, saying in a statement, cruel criminals must know that they will be strongly dealt with from now on.
Well, Kim Jung Un celebrated the new year just shortly after making strong threats against his enemies. He gave orders to the North Korean military to thoroughly annihilate the United States and South Korea if provoked. Now, December 18th saw North Korea's testing its most advanced ICBM yet, and it is believed that they will wrap up their testing in order to get more concessions from the U.S. if Donald Trump is reelected in 2024.
Well, the two leaders met in 2018 when President Trump was trying to work out a denuclearization plan for the peninsula. However, these talks, well, they eventually fizzled out. Over the past 2 years, North Korea has conducted more than 100 missile tests, which has pushed the United States and South Korea to expand their joint military drills. Kim continues to maintain that war could break out at any time over the U.S.-South Korean military provocations.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, 2024 began like a nightmare on Japan's Noto Peninsula in the central prefecture of Ishikawa, when a 7.6 magnitude earthquake destroyed centuries-old ways of living in just a few hours. Now, of course, concerns for another catastrophic tsunami followed, but that did not come. Instead, a devastating scene of new homeless and a desperate search for survivors. Please take a look at this video.
The market that stood here for centuries was erased in only hours, scarring the town of Wajima, just 20 miles from the epicenter of the earthquake. Days later, it's still smoldering.
The earthquake brought down the power lines and the buildings, and then the fire destroyed it all.
The fire moved quickly, leaving little time to escape. This woman says neighbors were calling out, but no one could help them. With more than 200 people still missing across the quake zone, rescue crews are going door to door. A woman in her 80s was rescued here yesterday, pulled from under her collapsed house where she had been trapped and conscious for days. But with the critical 72-hour window to find survivors now passed, hope to find others is fading. The powerful 7.6 magnitude earthquake triggered a major tsunami warning along Japan's western coast. Tremors so forceful, experts say the land moved up 13 feet in some places.
You see this break wall here? The water is on the wrong side of it.
The ground shifted sideways by over 3 feet. Landslides have rearranged the landscape. There have been hundreds of aftershocks. Our journey to ground zero took hours along buckled roads, some too broken to pass. Along the way, we stopped at villages that were heavily damaged and eerily empty.
A lot of the old historic homes in this area, the ones made with traditional materials, would have seen a lot of earthquakes before, but this one was so powerful, they just crumbled.
Most of the residents in the area are elderly, we were told. It's unlikely older homes will get rebuilt. Back in Wajima, little was untouched by the quake, according to officials. This building on its side at an intersection, the traffic light underneath still working. More than 10,000 people are now living at evacuation centers. We're making over 1,000 meals a day, this volunteer says. I'm happy to help. Japan is a country well prepared for earthquakes, but it will take years to rebuild here and likely longer to recover.
Boy, that's sad to see that. And, you know, as they said, many of the homes were so historic, they're not even going to bother rebuilding them.
Right, the earth raising 13 feet in some places. That's incredible, the force there. And as we mentioned, the devastation of those centuries-old buildings that are probably never going to be rebuilt.
Yeah, seems like Japan can't catch a break with the way the earthquakes, tsunamis, and not that long ago they just dealt with getting rid of the nuclear water waste from the Fukushima Daiichi plant. So they're having to deal with a lot. Well, from the Far East to the Middle East, people are being displaced, but this time it is due to war in the Gaza Strip. First, Palestinian families were pushed out of Gaza City as Israel invaded the territory and fled into central Gaza. But the fighting is moved as well, and the Palestinian people are being pushed to keep moving with no safe place in sight. Please take a look at the lines of cars with no end in this next video.
Defined by destruction and displacement. This is the daily routine of thousands of Palestinians fleeing the war in the northern part and the Gaza City. But this time, these thousands of people are pouring in from the central part of the Gaza Strip as the Israeli military just stepped up its military operations and widened the intensity and the scale of the bombings in order thousands of people to leave the central part all the way to come to Al-Mawasi area, the western of Rafah, again designating it as a safe zone. People here, you know, there is no safer place in the Gaza Strip, not even this small area of largely sand part.
We decided to go directly to Rafah city instead of going to Deir Bala because we knew it wasn't safe and we would be told to evacuate. There is no safe place in Gaza. We don't know where to go after this place.
People left under heavy shelling. There were people who had been killed on the Saladin Road as they were evacuating. From Nusrat, Maghazi, Burj Camp, Zwaidi, and Deir Bala city, all left for the south.
So in each passing day, the bombing's intensity increases to the point that people had no other choice but to leave the central part of the Gaza Strip all the way, taking a journey into Rafah city near the Egyptian-Gaza border in an attempt to save their lives in one of these small tents that they will set up. So far, thousands of people have arrived here. We're expecting more in the coming hours.
Katan, with 2.2 million people there in the Gaza, packed so tight, and of course, you know, they were told, hey, go here and this will be safe, and now they're being told you got to keep moving, and you know, it just seems like they keep getting moved from one area to the next. But of course, we've seen this before with there's so many people displaced when a war takes place in a country that there's just no place for them to go.
Yeah, the people in Yemen had to deal with the same thing. You know, where they're internally displaced, the people couldn't raise any food, they couldn't take care of their families. They weren't even sure, you know, if the place that they were going was going to not only be safe, but if it was going to be able to support them, to provide them with the food, clothing, and shelter. So there's a lot of frustration that these people are dealing with, you know, because of the decisions of a few affecting the masses as a result.
Right, absolutely. Well, if you'd like to find out more about these stories, contact the House of Yahweh. And once you do, don't forget to request your free Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call the House of Yahweh at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites by going to Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, and Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. And don't forget, you can email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And also, the Yisrael Says and Ask Yisrael programs are available for you to aid you in your study of the Scriptures. You can find those online by going to YisraelSays.com and AskYisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is another classic message from Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.